When you were born, something unique arrived in the world. There's a you that arrived here. And this helps people shift their focus in their body from like the things that have happened in their life to the light that is landing and moving through it. So as we learn to stay connected to this experience of arriving, of incarnating, of being light, we then learn to relate as light. And the world that opens up to us, the relational world that opens up to us, is not just the history of the earth, but it's the history of the universe. And so through the development of this light body and the integration process that happens with the entire universe, the same technology is available, just at a higher level. You can go anywhere in the universe. And going somewhere doesn't mean you actually leave. It means that you use your vehicle, you use your light body or your energy body, in this case, your light body or your soul, to relate to everything that else is happening at a light-based level in the higher dimensions. So you can feel where people come from, you can feel whole civilizations that exist and feel what life is like for them if you know how to use this vehicle. Again, I teach this as well because it's extraordinary and fun and very powerful transformationally, because it's through this vehicle that we actually allow more light to land in this world.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Blaise, welcome to Broaderlands podcast.
Hey, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, what an honor to have you. I had a friend growing up named Blaise. He's a really good friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he brought up some memories just with your name.
I don't hear that very often.
Yeah, before we get started, maybe you share a little bit about who you are and some of the spiritual work that you do briefly.
Yeah, well, first, I live in Canada. Don't know if that's relevant. I'm 39. I have just had my third child. I'm very involved in the process of living. I'm assembling a trampoline later today. But in my professional life, I also am a spiritual teacher. My work is my life. It's very merged with my personal experience. I love teaching. It's the greatest thing ever. And if somebody said, what do you teach about? I'd say I teach about awakening, healing, and manifestation, and collective consciousness. A pretty broad spectrum of skills. Basically, how to use your vehicle and how to explore the map so that you can live the best life and get whatever it is that you want out of life. I have a particular emphasis on trauma, embodiment, and the process of incarnating. And we can speak a lot about that. I run an online community, people all over the world, where we practice together. I teach skills and people support each other in a community or sangha. I'm very happy to be alive and participating with people who are doing great work. So that's a little bit about me.
You said Sangha, so are you a Buddhist?
No, I just use that word as like the idea of a spiritual community. What you're going to hear a lot from me is that most of the awakening process is going to be about relating to fields of consciousness, which are by nature interrelated. So whereas there are many focuses or spiritual practices that focus on personal development, like my liberation, my awakening, of course, that's what everybody wants. What I really emphasize is that most of the subtlety of consciousness are fields of interrelationship and interdependence, and that as such, we want to use them as they're designed to use, which means we want to relate to them. So again, how do you heal trauma? Not so much through personal effort, but through relating and expressing and communicating and being involved. How do you incarnate? The same thing. Even though this is a deeply personal process, it's relational in nature. And so the best way to help people awaken and heal and manifest is by creating really healthy collective fields that work, that function together. You'll hear me say lots and lots about why I think that's so important.
No, I love that. And, paraphrasing the Dalai Lama, he said, don't study Buddhism or practice Buddhism to become a Buddhist. Practice it to become a better you. So, like, I incorporate different things from different teachers and spiritual traditions and everything else. So,
Absolutely.
um, what does it mean to be asleep, and what does it mean to be awake? You hear those terms a lot in the spiritual communities.
Yeah, well, I would, if I were to tell my story, I would say that when I was a child and up until the time I was about 24, I was asleep. And then I had a process by which I became progressively more awake. So you could use me as a case study. What it means to be asleep for me is like you have no context for your life. I could only see what was really directly in front of me, and I didn't have a really good understanding of the map of reality, and I didn't know how to move through the map. I didn't really know how the things worked. So I thought I was educated and intelligent, and I thought I was pretty clever, but things in my life didn't really work out, and I couldn't figure out why that was. And it was really only till I started to contemplate the fact that life, the substance of life, is consciousness. This consciousness is a structure. This structure has rules, that I began to make progress in life. And progress means like my relationships were better, my health was better, I had direction, and I started to see consciousness clearly. Ultimately, I think if you were to say like where is awakening going, its purest outcome, the purest outcome would be to know the nature of reality, which is that I would describe that life is consciousness, life is a manifestation, life is creation. All things, all people, all beings, all thoughts, all form is an expression coming from the source of life, no matter how it expresses itself. So you could say life is a dream, life is a manifestation, life is a creation. That experience of sort of transcending your experience and witnessing it from absolute, that clarifies the nature of reality. And I would describe that as the purest expression of being awake. But most of the time, what we're doing is not going around telling people the nature of reality. Most of the time, what we're doing is an awakened being or an awakening being is relating to people, navigating life, making choices, doing things that are meaningful, trying to express goodness and make our way in the world in the best way we can. And so we could also say being awake is really a process of recognizing the structure of reality and using it to make your life and other people's lives a better place. That's most of what we are doing in the process.
I love that. Thank you. Which walks us into your upbringing. I'd love for you to share on your upbringing and walk us into that.
Yeah, like I said, sort of saw what was right in front of me. I liked playing with my friends. I'm from Canada. I loved playing hockey. I played organized hockey as a kid. I I just wanted to have fun. Um, I love my parents. I was an only child. There was a lot of tension in my family. My parents did not get along. Um, they weren't together. And I started to have challenges early in life. But when you're a kid, your challenges can't be that bad. I mean, at least they weren't for me. But the older I got and the more I needed to have responsibility and to show up and be able to participate in life, the harder it got. Like when they started handing out homework, I was in trouble. I was pretty good at the playing thing, but when it came to, taking care of yourself or making good decisions, being responsible growing up, that's where I started to have trouble. And when I was 12, my father died. This was a huge life event. He died um, suddenly, and I he and I didn't die on good terms, and it um, froze my development. Like I got stuck after that. I couldn't have told you that for a long time, but I got stuck. All my problems got really accentuated. So as I move into being a teenager, I'm not going in the right direction. But I couldn't have told you that. Like I didn't have enough self-awareness to say, hey, like all these things have happened in my life. Uh, I'm I'm in pain. I'm managing all this pain that I'm experiencing, and therefore I'm really not able to show up for life. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that. I was in a kind of fog. I just did the next thing that made sense to me. A lot of it was quite dishonest. I got into drugs. I lied about everything to everyone. And, I had an inability to be honest. By the time I got into my early 20s, it was getting more serious. Like the older you get, it's just not fun anymore. Nobody says, you know, uh, no, you'll work it out. It just got darker and darker. And when I was 24, I got sent to a treatment center for addiction. At the time, I thought, I've wasted my whole life. I'm way behind. And as soon as I got there, I realized I had it backwards. Actually, I'm at the very beginning of a wonderful journey, and that I'm felt very ready to turn my life around. And I realized that this thing called spirituality or consciousness, even though I had no idea what it meant, was clearly my future, clearly my secret. That's the secret. And that's what I was going to spend the rest of my life doing.
Wow.
And in terms of direction and motivation, I really haven't had any challenges since then. I just kind of, it's like being in a coma for the first 24 years of my life. And then when I went to treatment, it was like the beginning of the ability to make good decisions about my life, which was a huge relief. Because for the previous to that, everyone would say to me, you've got so much potential. Like what's the matter? What are you doing? Why is it like this? And I would say, I have no idea. I have no idea what is the problem. I don't know. And I wasn't able to come up with any solutions. No one else was really able to help me either. So it was a huge relief. Yeah, I'll pause and see. That's my childhood in a nutshell.
Did you find yourself getting advice or asking for guidance when you were to make a decision on certain things when you were new in that recovery?
When I was in recovery, so I went to a treatment center, and they they don't let you figure it out for yourself. Like that's the that's the thing about treatment. They tell you how it is. They kind of take over your life for a while, and they say you're not well, and you need to acknowledge that, and you need to start at the beginning. And that made sense to me. Like clearly, I didn't have a lot of ego about it. My life sucked. I didn't have anything to go to. Like they made a pretty convincing argument that I should listen to them. So they take over your life for a while and say, here are the basics. You need to be able to be honest. Like if I took one thing away from treatment, it was you need to be honest. You need to actually be honest with yourself and other people. You just cannot continue without that. And I thought, wow, that made a lot of sense. And then, but being honest isn't just like saying what you think, right? A story that I really love to tell that really changed my life. A lot of treatment was group therapy, and I had a counselor. I don't know what I said. I said something that made sense to me, and he said to me, "Wow, Blaise, that's really clever. Maybe you could put that in a book someday, but can you tell me how you feel right now?" And I remember thinking, no, I have no idea how I feel. I'm just saying words, but they're not actually coming from me. I don't know why I'm saying those things, and I have no idea what's going on for me. I remember being embarrassed in the moment, but after that, I thought, like, how's that possible? Like, how can I just say things without actually having to be connected to what's actually true for me? And it actually really fascinated me. So at that point, I kind of became really curious about like, how does this thing work? And I took lots of advice from the counselors and people around me. They helped me figure out this basic principle of like being in right relationship with yourself, like whatever is true, learning how to recognize that and say it and take feedback and all that. So I got a lot out of it. I also got a lot out of being around, other people who really didn't know what they were doing either and had made a lot of mistakes. So yeah, in early recovery, I took a lot of feedback, but they didn't know a lot. I wasn't, how do I say this? At the same time, I had this in my mind that I was gonna get into awakening and like I was gonna become enlightened. This is what I wanted, and nobody seemed to know much about that. So I had this dual relationship where I was like, I think people in recovery know a lot, but there's so much that they don't know. And I kind of made this deal with myself. I'm like, I'm going to do recovery the full deal. I'm going to do exactly what they tell me. I'm going to get a sponsor. I'm going to do the steps. I'm going to get a home group. I'm going to do all the things they tell me to do. And then at some point, I'm going to be done with this. And then there's going to be a next thing.
Yeah.
And so for 2 years, I just kind of put my head down and did, what I was supposed to do. And was super grateful for that. Right. I mean, I think recovery, even though I describe it as being limited, is extraordinary program and service to society, and definitely a big part of my early transformation.
No, I appreciate that. I got sober in 2009, went to the 12-step rooms, and I several years into it, went into a really dark place, and I realized there was a lot of stuff I spiritually bypassed. They don't talk about trauma. They don't really focus on trauma, which I believe is the key, the engine of addiction is trauma and soul loss, or Bill Wilson called it a spiritual malady, whatever you want to call that. But uh, I started to question things. I started to look elsewhere, and I started to get shunned. I started to people turned their back on me. People stopped talking to me because I started to be question things. I think Bill Wilson was awesome. He did the best he could at the time, but at the same time, he didn't know everything. There's a lot of spiritual bypassing going on. Old science. I don't believe in the disease model. I never did, and it's okay if people do. I'm not. I don't debate with them, but I believe it's really it's an attempt to escape human suffering for me. And the more I do it, it becomes a habit, and a habit is when your body can do it better than your mind. And it's also what Carl Jung talked about. It's a low level thirst for union with God, addiction, and I agree with him. Yeah, I just started to see a lot of different things. I was telling you about step 7 before we started recording. Step 6 and 7, asking God to remove something for me. It's not about that. It's more about integrating, different aspects of ourselves. I would love for you to touch on that a little bit because I think that's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say preached. Everything you've said is wonderful. So first, just naming it, when AA was created, the word trauma or the idea that people have trauma didn't even exist in our culture. So I give all of them, they used the consciousness at the time to create a system, and that system hasn't evolved. I mean, this is a bigger conversation about spiritual systems in general and conserving the essential message versus evolution. It's a question in all traditions and systems, but I'm definitely pro evolution. I think we're in a really exciting time, broadly speaking, for the Earth, and there is a radical evolution that I can't imagine not participating in. So just like you, what happened to me when I went to treatment is they asked me about my father's death, and I started to talk about it. And if I told you before, I would have said, yeah, that happened in the past and I got over it. And yeah, that was hard, but now I'm here. And I had these experiences in treatment where I would start to feel my body. So it's like, that's what I'm saying, but like, what does my body actually have to say about my father dying? And I had these releases of emotion where I felt 12. Like I was grieving like a 12-year-old. And I remember thinking, how is this possible? Like, it's like my body has been frozen in time. And I didn't know it. It's like these feelings have been sitting in my body for 12 years since I was half my life. I was 24 at the time. How's that possible? And what I noticed is AA doesn't really, or the treatment center doesn't really get into the mechanics of how that works, right? It doesn't tell you about stored energy in the body, doesn't really reference the body in general. So the step 6, the idea that, you're going to be relieved of your suffering in some way is really vague. Like what are the mechanics of that? And what I realized is there's this whole world called trauma healing that knows a lot about that. And I became fascinated with this body process. And I was very fortunate to meet an extraordinary man named Thomas Hubel, who demonstrated to me a level of understanding about this that like blew my mind, blew my conscious. I met him and I watched him and I listened to him and I interacted with him. And I left like convinced. It was like I just met the first person in my life who really knew what they were talking about. And I just decided, this is it. I'm just going to do what this guy has done. I'm going to do what he tells me to do because he clearly knows what he's doing. And his simple principle, if we take the basics of it, is the past is stored in your body. Nothing goes away. Either the past is processed and integrated, lives in you in a healthy way, or the past lives in you in a contracted way where the energy doesn't move very well, where there's low levels of potential, and you use energy to store these pockets within yourself. So you have to go through the body and find these pockets of the past to integrate them, which means to move them from like a compressed, stored state to part of the sort of living field of vitality that is your body. And he demonstrated this. And I thought that makes perfect sense. That aligns with what I'm experiencing. And I just decided to do that. And over time, what happens is you go from a model where you think, oh, I want to get rid of these things, like a negation-based model, which is I want less suffering, I want less thoughts, I want less pain, to realizing actually every time you integrate something, it's not about subtraction. It's actually more like addition. What you get is more energy, more presence, a stronger field, more transparency, more clarity into the nature of life, more ability to respond to life, like more substance. You're building a vehicle of energy that you use every single day. So it's not that I want, just like you say, it's not that I want things to go away. I don't really want them to go away. I want them to move through me in a different way. The problem isn't that my father, if you take my example of my father dying, the problem isn't that he died. The problem is that I didn't actually process and feel the experience. So for me, when I was 14 or 18, I didn't know anything about loss. I just was traumatized. But if you take now, after processing his death and his life over and over again, I've become wise. Like I actually have learned from the experience of having a father and having lost a father. I become a wiser person because I've gone through life, because I've actually felt it and gone through the whole process of grief and love and all the things that come with that. So there's nothing wrong with the fact that he died. I don't want that to go away. I just want to learn from it, which means you actually have to feel it and go through it. And what trauma is it's a mechanism that stops us from going through things because they're overwhelming.
Mm.
That's the basics of it. So it protects us, but it robs us of the wisdom and the learning and the higher energy state that we would get if we were to go through it. So we have these leftover experiences. And then again, my attitude went from, how do I get rid of them to actually how do I get more of them? Like I want to get into them. I want to have more of them rather than less of them. And that's the integration model. The basics of it is more. You want to feel all of life and have it live in one nervous system, one energy body, one chakra system, one consciousness.
I love that. I love the connection between trauma and addiction. Even we're talking about the AA, the 12-step communities. The co-founder Bill Wilson, he came from childhood trauma. He had so much trauma, childhood trauma, unresolved trauma. It's shocking that it's not talked about in the 12-step community. I wish in his story we would put his childhood, and I'm actually working on that right now. But yeah, he had double abandonment issues. Yeah, his childhood sweetheart died. Principal came in and made an announcement. Talks about being in depression. Yeah, just not being able to talk about his emotions. Talks about how when his mother first hit him, how that affected him. Um, when his father left him, he talks about hiding this wound for a very long time, which, Gabor Mate so talks about a lot about trauma as well, and how he links trauma with addiction. And what trauma means, he says, is, Peter Levine will say trauma is a disconnection of self. How do you define the word trauma? And how do you connect trauma with addiction?
Right. Okay. So let's start um, with the second question. You said something really beautiful. You quoted Jung. can't remember your exact words, but addiction is like a cry for a meaningful spiritual experience. And, this became kind of clear to me late in my addiction and in treatment was like, I wanted to feel alive. And I had no other means for meaningful living present moment experiences other than to take drugs. Now, the problem is when you take drugs, you actually kind of dull or numb your consciousness, and you have to take more and stronger drugs to have a meaningful experience. And it's a terrible strategy to feeling alive. It's like borrowing money as a way of being rich, right? It's like you just going deeper and deeper into debt. So when I sobered up, I kind of wrapped my head around this. It's like, I'm not going to give up drugs to just have a flat, meaningless experience. Like that's the whole thing for me was like, I need to find out how to do that in a healthy way. So I read these books by spiritual teachers or one in particular who were talking about the fanciest experiences of life, like the body as a structure of light, for example. And I was just thinking like, wow, like that's actually what that person experiences. Like,
Mm.
okay, so like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? So what I realized as I started to process this stuff is I was making a trade. Okay, yes, there's pain. Yes, there's discomfort. Yes, it's rough to heal from trauma and to face the body. But progressively, the more I did it, the more alive I felt, and the more my body came to life. So I realized that it's just not a solution to just stop taking drugs. You have to satisfy the urge to be alive, to feel the richness of life, to have a beautiful felt sense experience. So I'm going to pause because you asked the first question was I kind of answered the second one. What was the first one you asked? You remember?
Where totally forgot my question.
Okay.
I think it was how do you connect was it trauma with addiction?
Oh yeah. Okay, so yeah, great. That is your question. So basically, when you have a lot of trauma, you are numb and in pain. You're both in pain, and your life doesn't feel good, but you're also numb. So for me, addiction, drugs are the way to get around that. It's like a hack on the fact that life doesn't feel very good. So of course, if you have a lot of trauma, of course you're going to want to jazz it up. So the way to solve addiction, in my opinion, is to give you the real thing, right? Just as you say, give the person the meaningful, living, purposeful spiritual experience that they're craving, and then drugs aren't appealing. So
Mhm.
that's I found that in AA too. Is like when you sit around the rooms, early recovery is beautiful. Does it take you to a vibrant experience where all that you see is love and light and awareness and the structures of higher consciousness? I didn't see that. So I realized like, okay, I kind of got to go beyond this addiction model and start listening to what spiritual teachers are saying. So I got really into meditation, and I meditated as much as I possibly could, and I got really into trauma healing. And then of course, I had a really intense spiritual awakening experience that kind of put all that, uh, yeah, made it from something I had to work at to something that was like happening to me or consuming me, like getting set on fire.
Mm. No, I appreciate that. I feel like we had similar paths. I was probably in the 12-step program a lot longer. I don't know, you probably dabbled in it. But I started to see the calling myself an alcoholic over and over wasn't healthy for the mind and the body and spirit,
Yeah,
right? I think that's very
yeah,
dangerous. And I know it's meant to help the new person, but it's
yeah,
actually destroying the person with time at the same time. I mean, I think it's meant to take someone through the book and say, hey, that's me. But that doesn't mean it's your identity for the rest of your life. The limiting beliefs.
yeah,
And then, like you brought up something that I noticed as well is having had a spiritual awakening from the result of these steps is it's not really emphasized, it's not really talked about at a deeper level, a spiritual awakening. And so I really appreciate that
about what you said as well.
Hmm.
Did you notice that? Did you feel uncomfortable calling yourself an addict or an alcoholic, whatever you had?
I all the things you say resonate with me. I absolutely remember that. And yeah, I I said it. I was in the program for 2 years and I worked it. I did all the things they said. And afterwards I would not consider I haven't considered myself an addict really since. I just that frame of life, it just is not how I view progress or development. So I haven't thought about that myself in those terms in a long time.
What's amazing is even when I life gets hard, I'm going through something. I don't have a mind and body that take even thinks about or takes me to a drink or a drug. Because I retrained the mind and body to live in the present moment. I changed my coping skills and I don't have those reactions anymore.
Yeah.
But when I was trapped in that state, yeah, of course, your body can take your to a drink better than your mind, and yeah, that's not my who I am today. So calling myself that over and over, it was dangerous. And I would just identify eventually as my name's so and so, and I'm a grateful member of blah blah blah. And people would say, "Oh, he's trying to be different. He's trying to be different," But you talk about three types of spiritual awakenings.
Yeah.
I would love for you to touch on that. And how do we know which stage we're in?
Yeah. Uh, Maybe another way to say it would be there are three facets of spiritual awakening. And I'll circle back to what you described about yourself as like where I see that coming from in people. So the first, we talked a lot about trauma. We've talked about, I guess, embodiment, the integration of the nervous system, the sense of an energy body. I would place all of this as a kind of a vertical line through the body. This is your nervous system. This is your developmental history. This is the chakra system, your emotional body, your sensations, and the subtle, I don't know what to call them, centers of energy that you would call the chakra system. They can be developed. They can be developed because you feel them, because you express them. I mean, this is what energy does. Healthy energy is energy that's moving.
Mm.
Healthy feelings are feelings that are moving. So to develop vertically is to feel your body. Again, when you feel things, they move. And this movement always moves towards an opening.
Mm.
So you feel in your heart is opening. You feel in your gut is opening. You feel in your head is opening. So it's to feel the body, to take great effort to feel the body and support what's there to move. Again, it's not just about, yes, there's blocks and yes, there's contractions and yes, there's stored pain, but ultimately it's about supporting like the nervous system or the chakra system to blossom. And in meditation, primarily when you're sitting by yourself, this looks a lot like um, very impersonal. Like you're less likely to have childhood content and trauma come up. You just have raw sensations. That's what dominates um, meditation. When you sit by yourself, again, other people might have different experience, but I find you just have raw sensations. You're just being with how you feel now. It doesn't have so much context. But if you engage in like the practices that I teach often, you start to read your body as your entire developmental history.
Mm.
So just like rings in a tree, if you cut a tree down, you look at the rings and you can see what has happened in the life of the tree. Everything that has ever happened to you is reflected through this vertical energy body, and you can relate to it. You can go towards it. So in my work, for example, you could ask somebody, how in this life have you felt safe? And you invite them to feel their root. And they look into their body and they say, what does my root or what does my sacrum or what does my lower body tell me about my early experience of safety?
Mm.
And so by actively reflecting and feeling your life history, you can bring to light how life was for you through your whole process, through your whole developmental process. And you can support that to move and be integrated, to become more conscious of it It's not in the background because you're moving towards it, and support it to blossom. So you can do this with your whole life history, but because the energy body is not separate, you can do this with your family history, you can do this with your ancestral history, you can do this with your collective history. So this vertical field of development, the opening, it goes on almost forever. Like you just keep, there's just more and more content. Much of it precedes your life, that this field of energy just opens and opens and opens and opens. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And progressively you become like like I describe, a wisdom body. You are the integrated wisdom of your life, the life of your ancestors, and ultimately the history of the earth. That you are a library that has actually learned from all these experiences. Again, you can learn from experiences. You can be traumatized by experiences, but that doesn't mean that you've actually learned from them. So this vertical development really allows you to harvest all of those life experiences, and it creates one integrated, unified body nervous system. And what that means is like that when your body or your nervous system is integrated, what you see when you feel life is unified. You see one life. If your body is fragmented, you see a fragmented world. Consciousness feels fragmented. The more integrated your consciousness is, the more integrated your nervous system is, the more integrated your body is, the more you see the unified field and the fact that all life is interconnected. So this is what the spiritual awakening, you could say, looks like, is an increasingly unified, singular world. The fabric of life becomes whole through you, and this is then what you see. And then your life actions are really about participating and caring for the unified reality that is all of us. So vertical development is really about feeling the life that you've lived, integrating that, perceiving unified reality, and then finding your way to navigating it, finding your way to participating in it, finding out how to respond to the things that happen in this world to support life to become increasingly more unified and whole and healthy. So it's a wonderful lane of development. And you're going to, for all of us, we're going to spend a lot of time here because this field of energy, which we could also call the fifth dimension, is under cared for. It's not in a particularly good state of health. So there's a tremendous amount of work to be done at this level of life. I mean, you look at human history, you look at the things that are happening in the world, and you recognize, oh, this field actually needs a tremendous amount of care. So the second plane or facet of awakening is through light. And light is the vehicle that incarnates and moves through this field. So I would describe this not as a vertical line of awakening or development, but as a horizontal line. So for me, in my experience, like light moves forward into the body and into life. That's the direction of the future. And it comes from the subtle dimensions of higher consciousness, the light-based dimensions of consciousness, which exist sort of in the deep interior. So the premise of this practice, or what awakening looks like, is to sort of feel what precedes your life, feel what exists in the higher dimensions, and to bring that into the world and into the future. So for me, like every human life is a door through which light passes through the fifth dimensional field into the physical world and into life. Every human life is light arriving in the world. Every single human birth and life is the possibility that light is going to come into this world and inform, to bring more light and goodness into the world and more information. So the way that we practice this, again, much of it for me is relational, but the way that we practice this is sinking deeper into our experience of light. You could say where we come from and what we're coming with, but also learning to bring that forward into life, to embody light, to have this direction for the light. The light's coming into the world and it's going towards the future. So when I hear you say like that drugs and alcohol don't have a pull on you anymore, you can reflect on this, but what I would say is that you have a direction and that you don't have so much pain. So which means that your vehicle is healthy and it's going now in a direction, the direction that your soul is calling you. And so when your vehicle, when your body is healthy, progressively healthy, and you're moving towards the future that feels aligned with your soul, there's no reason to get lost anymore. You don't get lost anymore once you have a direction and as you've integrated the health of your life. You have a healthy car and it's going in the right direction, and you don't just get, sidelined by things anymore like I used to, or like you used to, back when both of those structures were not particularly alive or healthy. And I'm just going to name the third thing. The third thing is, so yes, it's important to have direction. Yes, it's important to have a relationship with all this information and to heal our ancestors and to feel all the higher structures of reality. But there's also a call to know the nature of reality. And we're not going to experience that within consciousness. So the third process is to follow this light, to follow the path of light, which is coming from the source, to follow it, to retract your attention deeper and deeper and deeper, to find the beginning, to find the place where life comes from, to find the place where you come from, to find the source of your experience. And ultimately, this is to transcend life itself and to arrive at the absolute and to know the truth of life. So that's primarily what the Buddha is inviting people to do. He's inviting this sinking back to the source where you recognize the truth of life. The Buddha was not so concerned about navigating the world. He was not very concerned about, at least initially, about moving forward. He was trying to find the place where life made sense and there was no more suffering. And he was extremely determined to do so. So broadly speaking, each person has a mix of motivation. Like some people are really concerned, like the Buddha was about the nature of reality. Some people are really concerned about being a parent or manifesting their potential or starting a business or helping the world to heal. So like within these three facets of awakening, people have a really broad spectrum of motivation. And it's not so important that you pick the right one. The most important thing is that you respond to what's actually true and alive for you now and get the tools to support yourself. Over time, they all fit together. Those three kind of processes are interconnected and they lead to each other. So it's one process with these three facets that I outline.
I love that. Thank you. The question that popped up is, how does relationships serve as mirrors for spiritual growth, and what role do they play in awakening?
Yeah. So again, for the Buddha, they play very little role because he's sitting there with his eyes closed, like many meditators, and it kind of goes out of focus. So that reality is not dominant if you're a meditator. It's not dominant if you're focusing on non-dual or no self teachings. It's a secondary part of life that monks aren't particularly oriented to. But for me, I'm married. I have children. I can't get away from it. Like every moment is relational. And what I realized, what again Thomas Hubel really identified, was like, if that's what your life path is, you just can't avoid it. You have to lean into the fact that relationship is a fundamental facet of life, and you have to use it as a way to make awakening happen. So again, there's this, when we talk about going through the dimensions of consciousness, at the highest level, you say there's one creation, right? And so you can really lean into the no self or the nature of reality or the non-dual teachings. But all of the dimensions from the physical world where there's complete separation to the absolute, all of them become progressively more unified. So what this means is like most of consciousness is relational. Most of consciousness is relational. Energy is relational. Light is relational. All of it is about relationship. The universe was created so we could relate. It's not a problem. It's the invitation of our lives. And so to have a really full and rich life, to awaken, our job is to bring as much health to these fields of relationship as possible. So trauma is a personal phenomenon, meaning like my body becomes fragmented, but the trauma exists beyond the individual. Trauma is a phenomenon that exists all through the fifth and sixth dimension of energy in the process of incarnating. Trauma is the field that we all live in.
Mm.
So all of our relationships are a reflection of trauma. So you can't go anywhere in life, really, in my experience, without bumping into this problem that not only is our body disintegrated, but the collective consciousness of this planet is integrated. The field of energy which we all share is disconnected. If you want evidence of that, just watch the level of conflict there is uh, on the news. Like everywhere within the world, there is conflict. So instead of thinking, well, this conflict is, there are people who are right and there are people who are wrong, what we're looking at is we're looking at a field of energy that is traumatized. Like our conflict with each other is a reflection of the fact that the entire world is traumatized. Again, look at human history and you will see plenty of evidence for that as an assumption. So when we go through life, what we're going to do inevitably is we're going to bump into people. We're going to get triggered. People are going to get triggered. We're going to feel unsafe. We're going to have to navigate emotional challenges and challenges of unmet needs and challenges of the felt sense of disconnection or being unsafe. We're going to have to navigate these challenges all the time. There's no way around it. You could try to meditate your way out of it. You could avoid that process by meditating, but even then, if you meditate, you're going to run into that same content anyways, eventually, in a very personal and intense way, and you're just going to have to sit through it. So the skill set that we learn, most of awakening, I think in the modern context, is relating to emotion, learning how to express the emotions that you're having, and learning how to receive the emotions that are happening, and recognizing that because so much of that content in this fifth dimensional energy body that's both personal and collective is from the past. It's not enough just to say, I feel angry or I feel sad, but you have to navigate that dimension of life and realize when the past is active. What part of the past is active? So when I feel scared, like what learning to move towards the feeling of fear, relate to it in a way that you can actually see what that content is. Learning how to recognize your whole life, the life of your ancestors, and the life of the world in the content that you're bumping into all the time. So over time, we walk, if you are a monk, the intensity of your spiritual practice is you just sit there, and that is intense. Every day, all day, that's a grind. If you are not a monk and you're moving through the world, the intensity of your practice is uh, you get married, you have kids, you start a business, you visit your in-laws, whatever. That's your practice. Your practice is the stuff that happens when you move through your life, when you want to start a business, but you actually don't feel confident enough, or when you want to public speaker and you feel sad. That's your process, is learning how to actually turn towards what you are feeling and what's happening in your everyday life so that this primarily vertical process can happen, so that you can harvest the stored past, to get triggered essentially and harvest the stored past to grow, to have your energy body awaken. Now, what I do is, when you talk about Sangha, is I've created a group of people who have the skill, who are developing the skill to do that together. This is my primary job. My primary job is to be with people in this process, support them to be with other people in this process, so that this flow of energy moves as easily, as efficiently as possible. So I create the conditions to make this as easy as possible. You don't have to wait till you get triggered and have this really difficult experience to have transformation. Like, we can move towards the body, and we can actually move with the natural healing process that stuff wants to come up, and we can relate to it intelligently. So again, just one more thing in this sort of relational dimension in the field of energy, one of the most important things to recognize is that all the energy that I store in my body is designed to be expressed. It's designed to be expressed and received. It's part of the field of energy. It's part of the collective. So for example, when a child says that they're really angry, what do you do with that energy? As a parent, you receive it. It's the job of that anger is to be expressed and received. And you help your child not by telling them what to do with their anger or telling them they shouldn't be angry. Your job is to feel with them. What happens is their anger expresses itself, they feel it, their energy body grows, they become more connected to life, and they learn. So much of the work that we're doing as adults is to complete that developmental process. Our world has not been particularly available. So the fastest, most efficient way, in my experience, to heal trauma or to complete the developmental process or to have the chakras open is to find someone who is receptive and share with them. Because the nature of this content is it's all meant to be shared. It's all meant to be expressed and received. So it moves really fast. It moves really naturally when we're in the company of people who can really hold us and be with us and want to know and receive us. And what we find is that not only is that good for me, it's good for you. It's good for everyone. Like this living field that we all share, the more energy flows through it, the better we all feel. Like that's the nature of the dimensions. We're sharing it. It's like a pool of water. The temperature, that just keeps getting warmer, right? The more, it doesn't actually matter whether it's shame or sadness or joy or love. More energy means this dimension of life is healthier. So this is primarily what I invite. And your spouse or your neighbor, they're not necessarily going to be very helpful for you in that process. This is my call, is to create a field of practitioners, a group of practitioners that have as much skill as possible. They can be as supportive and as efficient as possible. And what happens when you do this is people learn to move from a personal felt sense of self to a relational and a collective sense of self. Your body, when you feel safe and connected, it's like plugging yourself into the internet, that your body extends itself into the whole field, and you can feel, you can access everything that is here in life, and you become a part, you feel like you are a part of life. You feel not separate. And so when we create this field that integrates energy particularly effectively, it pulls energy out of people. Like it doesn't take so much work to heal. The field just pulls charge out of people, and the level of healing and transformation is extraordinary.
Yeah, thank you. And you brought up something about like conscious parenting. How important is that to practice conscious parenting and being aware of your child's needs, emotions, um, and just help guide them with certain experiences and talk about certain stuff. How important is communication and understanding?
Yeah, well, I think the way that you would find the answer to that question for yourself is you'd start is by looking at the impact of your upbringing on you. So again, as we start to become more connected with our body, we feel the impact of our environment and the impact of what was available relationally on our development. And we have all these stored emotions that need to be felt, that need to be expressed. It was not available. So what we start to realize is that our developmental process is incomplete. And that's because of what has been available in this world relationally, and the level of presence or embodiment that is here. Like we have a tremendous challenge in our world because our children grow up into a world where there actually isn't the receptivity that they need to complete their developmental process. So when you see this for yourself, it informs what you want to offer your children or other people or your neighbor, anybody. You realize that when I am in my body and when I am present and able to receive what's happening for other people, it expresses out of them. I feel it with them. We feel connected, and they don't have to store it inside themselves. So once you know this, once you experience for this yourself and you start to watch it in relationship, the focus of parenting changes from like, I want to teach my child something, or I want to get my child to certain behaviors, or I want my child to act a certain way, that's becomes really secondary. What's primary is I want my child to feel safe. I want my child to be received, and I want them to be able to complete this process of being themselves. So it means when they're angry, my job is to be with them rather than fix it. When they feel scared, I feel with them and I respond to them, and I learn, through the wisdom of my experience, I learn how to meet them in a developmentally appropriate way. So there's this rich process that we, in my world, we learn through self-exploration. I become wise. I have this body of integrated wisdom that I then share with my children. And then I become the vessel for them to develop their vertical development. And then the second part of that is not only do I see my child's feelings and my own developmental process, but I also start to reflect on the fact that each life, each incarnation is a unique stream of light into this world. So what I start to recognize is that I am bringing intelligence into this world. I'm bringing experience into this world. I'm bringing a tremendous amount of wealth into this world through just the process of arriving here. And this is unique. It may come from higher consciousness where, the consciousness is beautiful and quite unified and healthy, and yet it's unique through me. And so what this means is, as I learn to recognize this in myself, also, I learn to recognize this in children, that I'm trying to bring light into the world. That my child's actually coming with intelligence. They're not just a block of clay that's going to grow up into be my child. Like, I have to be able to see the unique light that is present. So whether that's actually trying to land here, I become the field that holds and receives. I say, like, you are light coming into the world. I see you, and I'm so grateful that you are here. And we can do this with people at any life stage, but this is what's also really needed, not just that our feelings and needs are integrated, but that our souls are integrated. We assume because I'm here that means I have incarnated, like I have incarnated here, but incarnation is a process, just like I named earlier, that is supported. So if again, the more that the field of the nervous system exists in a living way, the more light can pass through it. So this is a really beautiful relationship between the energy that's present and the skill or the clarity of seeing through this field, and the ability for light to pass through into this world. When there's trauma, we create a kind of a barrier to light. So the other part of it is our job is to clear up as much of our life history as possible, so that when our children are born, their light moves through the cleanest, brightest, most developed field that's possible. And that's progressive. You don't complete that before you have children. You just keep clarifying that field and inviting more and more light to arrive into this world.
I love that. And I love how you brought up integrated wisdom, and going back to 6 and 7, if I'm asking something outside of me to do it for me, I'm going to miss out on that. And I really appreciate that. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. I wanted to ask you something that's not really talked about a lot, is, at least I haven't seen people talk about it as often. I think this topic's important. The dark side of a spiritual awakening. Are there challenges with people and struggles for having a spiritual awakening, like not fitting in anymore, not being, feeling in heightened awareness and feelings, being more, feeling the suffering of the collective, more in tune to that kind of stuff, not being able to fit in groupthink? Is there a dark side to spiritual awakening that we have to learn how to integrate?
Oh yeah, I would put it as three primary challenges. The first is it can put a lot of pressure on your physical body and world. It can cause illness or physical challenges to surface that you have to work through. That's definitely true, not necessarily universal, but that happens to a lot of people. But the main thing is that this field that I described, the fifth dimension, this field of energy, the chakra system that's both personal, familial, ancestral, and collective, it is full of pain. It's full of stored pain. And the bad news is you can't get around it. There's no way to avoid feeling it. So when you awaken, it's going to put you in touch with the pain in your body. It's going to put you in touch with the pain in your family. It's going to put you in touch with the pain of your ancestors. And it's going to put you in touch with the pain of your world. There's no way around that. So a lot of the work, so to speak, is just dealing with the things that you discover in the fifth dimension. And it's pretty continuous. Like there's a lot of energy and it just goes on and on and on. So at first, you don't know how far it goes, right? You don't know how much pain you're going to have to feel. You don't know how much sadness or whatever it is. So you think, okay, I felt a little bit and then I'll get through it and then it'll be better. But then there's just more and there's just more and more. And what happens over time is you become very mature in your response to emotional pain. Like, of course there's pain. Of course there's going to be feelings. Of course there's going to be sadness and shame. And you become very at peace with this part of life. You become very mature in your dealings with it. But that's a process, like to realize that you're going to have to feel all of this pain and that the whole history of the world is going to need to be cleaned up is a heavy thing to discover. And in my opinion, it's really best discovered in a group of people that are working on it together and that we are tending to this world together and that can hold the beauty of this dimension of reality and hold us in that. Because as you're describing, if we start to go down this road, there are many people in our world who maybe our connections or our families who don't recognize that or even deny that reality. And this can be very painful and causing separation. So I think it's very, very important to have people in your life, whether it's a teacher or a therapist or again, a collective, a sangha, friends, like a whole world ultimately, that really values what you are doing. And conversely, inspires you. Like I sit with people who are doing extraordinary work on their personal history, on their family, on their history. Every day, I sit with these people every day. And my experience of sitting with them is it doesn't pain me. I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel heavy and sad. I feel inspired. Like we're the living solution. So it's very important to have sort of the view, which comes from relationship, which comes from love, which comes from connection and mutual care, that we're doing something very important, even though it's difficult. And your contribution, the things that you've experienced in your life, the things that have happened in your family, I'm so grateful that you are sharing this. Like, that's the kind of community that we can create to hold this difficult part of life. The third thing that I would describe as a challenge, which is more new to me, comes from the dimensions of light, which is that when you start to recognize in your own body the presence of light, what you see are the higher dimensions of reality. You see beyond the fifth dimensional field, you see the universe as a structure of light. And describing that experience, whether it's where you come from or what you interact with, there's going to be lots of people who don't experience that. You know, our world doesn't even agree that those exist. So what I find pretty universally is the people I work with, when they start to move into those dimensions, they become quite self-conscious. They go, "Ah, God, I can't believe I'm going to say this," or like, "Did I really just say that?" Or who am I going to say this to? Like, it becomes like science fiction, essentially. Your life becomes science fiction. And there are many, many people in the world who aren't going to stay with you there. So the third thing is, I find the third challenge is learning to make peace with how exotic, bizarre, science fiction, beautiful, magical, the reality of light and the higher dimensions of consciousness are. And being supported to do that as well. Not doing that so much on your own, not wanting people in your life to think you're crazy or to be denied. And often these things they're not inconsequential. Often they're deeply meaningful and personal. And that those realities really actually need to be seen and received by other people. So those are the three challenges I think of off the top of my head.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I heard you on Pooja. You were on Pooja's podcast, and she's a good
Yeah.
friend. And she asked a couple. You started off with a couple really good questions, and the first thing she asked, one of the first questions was, "What is consciousness?" I would love for you to touch on what is consciousness and what is the collective consciousness.
Yeah. So again, where I started to be asleep for me, it's what felt real. The foundation of life is the physical world, and consciousness is some phenomenon that occurs in the brain or occurs in the molecules or somehow is created. So what the foundational truth is the physical reality, and consciousness is a byproduct. What awakening has revealed to me is that it's actually inverted, that consciousness is the fundamental material of the universe. Everything else is a manifestation or expression of that. So because consciousness has many dimensions, you can experience many different qualities of consciousness. The three that I would emphasize are, other than the physical world, are love, light, and the spaciousness of awareness. So I'd say creation has these three primary qualities: love, light, and awareness. And the structure of consciousness is an extraordinary, intricate organization of all of those. Universes, worlds are built out of those substances. But what makes them one, what makes that one, is that you find yourself witnessing these qualities of consciousness. You find yourself witnessing experience itself. And this is where, again, the viewpoint, you see the nature of reality when you find yourself transcending all of the qualities of consciousness. So today I would say that consciousness itself is impermanent. It's a manifestation. It's a creation. Just like when you have a dream at night, a dream is created, it lives and dies. It's not foundational. Similarly, I would say consciousness is not foundational. It has a life cycle. It is created and will come to an end. That viewpoint doesn't get you out of consciousness. It helps you understand the purpose of consciousness. It's the same purpose as a movie or a dream or anything else. You go to the movies not to say that movies are not real or to leave the movie theater. You go to the movie theater to watch a movie. You have a dream so that you can dream. The purpose of consciousness is to have experiences. And because consciousness has such a diversity of dimensions and qualities, you can have a tremendous variety of experiences within the experience of consciousness. So there are these two qualities. One is to see the reality that I'm describing, the absolute nature of reality. And the other is to navigate within consciousness to have experiences that really reflect what you want, what feels true for you.
How would you define the collective consciousness?
Yeah, so at any point you could call collective consciousness, you could describe pretty much, you could describe many different levels of consciousness as being collective in nature. But if we start at the fifth dimension or level of energy, you take your body and you take your feelings and you take your emotions, and then you learn to relate from this. What you will feel is that your energy body, your nervous system, your chakra system is not actually bound to your physical body or your personal experience. It moves out into life in every direction. So, for example, when I have a phone, I connect to the internet, and through my phone, I experience this nearly boundlessness field of information. My phone is the vehicle through which I plug into the internet. Similarly, our nervous system, energy, body, chakra system is the vehicle by which I learn to relate to a field of energy which pervades the earth. And this field I would call the collective consciousness. It's like a single body of energy, a collective body. And because the mechanics of consciousness are so beautiful, this body is everything that is happening now, but it's also the full past. Like, again, when we talk about integration, energy doesn't go away. It's not bound in time in the same way that a banana peel, banana peels rot and go away, as does everything in our physical world. Energy doesn't age in that way. It doesn't die. So this fifth dimensional field of energy it's filled with everything that has ever happened at this level of life, everything that has ever happened to every single person in the history of the earth. And you could say the earth itself is a living being. So it's an extraordinarily rich and full field of energy or field of information, which currently isn't operating in a particularly unified way. So when we have conflict between, with my child or my wife or my neighbor, it's one organism that is in conflict with itself, essentially. I mean, human beings don't quite operate at that level yet. We're working on it. We're working at actually feeling the fact that we have mutual well-being. Of course, when feelings come up and there's stress in the system, or there's essentially trauma being expressed itself, the organism has conflict with itself. So our job is to resolve all those places of conflict so that the world can operate in its unified reality. And so my body, I can feel my body, I can feel my feelings, and at the same time, I realize that my energy, my motivation, my love, my care, all of these things are not separate from the energy of everything else. And I learn to live both as an individual, but as also part of the collective. I have a dual role in life. I am me, but I am also us. I learn to care for both, and my life becomes a reflection of that. So this collective field of energy. So when we talk about awakening, this is very exciting to share, is that when we talk about awakening, we often think like, oh, awakening means that my chakra system wakes up and I see the unified nature of reality, or I feel this field of energy. But there's another awakening that's possible. I would even go as far as to say is happening. It's not just that I wake up, but that the entire field, the collective, the global body, the collective consciousness recognizes itself. It wakes up to itself. It becomes online. And in this way, a collective awakening is not just a process of 8 billion people waking up. It's the process of one collective recognizing and integrating itself. And much of what I'm orienting towards is not people's personal awakening. Of course, that's what they come for, but it's to getting this collective body at a fifth dimensional level to become integrated and live and act as one, to recognize itself. I take it a step further. You could also describe collective consciousness from higher dimensions, not just as the earth itself, but the entire cosmic reality, all beings, all of the universes, all of the structures of life integrated into one living being. So if you ask me what's happening on the earth at a sort of collective level, I'd say there's two processes. One is the collective on earth is working itself out, is trying to move towards a state where it can live as one, but also the entire universe is working to reintegrate the earth into the cosmic collective reality. And so we are learning how to relate to both of these collective processes as well and support them.
I love that. I was going to ask you a question, but you kind of answered it already. How does duality serve a purpose to bring us back to oneness? But you touched on it. You touched on it, so I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um, no, I'm going to end it with one last question. I wanted to ask you: can you take us into your inner world and share with us how you personally experience our interconnectedness? Like, I don't feel that all the time in my daily life, but I do have these deep moments of this
Yeah.
interconnectedness and this inner knowing, which affects how I live my life daily.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, okay, so first I'm gonna describe how we can do it, and then I'll tell you like where I know that goes. Okay. So when I work with people, with the individually or as a group, my primary orientation is to say, I want you to feel your body. I want you to feel the movement of your sensations, the movement of your emotions, movement of your thoughts. Your body, your nervous system is fluid. It's always moving. This is happening right now. And I ask, does your body know that we are here together? I'm not asking you mentally, I'm asking, does your body know? And what I'm inviting you to do, I'm inviting your body, your nervous system, your energy body, to do this really natural thing called relating, where you participate, you engage, you connect with life from your energy. So when we practice this, what happens is your focus shifts from me to us. There's a sense of presence. There's a field where you and I are. So most of what I'm doing with people in groups is helping them shift their focus to this relational reality that they access through their body. And then we talk from here, we share from here, we feel from here. This is how you integrate energy into this field. You feel the field, and then you feel into it. So this is much of the work, is just to feel connection. You relate from your body, you feel from your body, you express energy, you receive energy. Everything you do here grows your capacity to stay plugged in and stay connected. So progressively, this gets more and more built in, like easier to access, more depth, more intricacy, more clarity, more subtlety, more breadth. And where this goes is you can, from your body, I can navigate the field in any direction I want, which means I can feel things anywhere within this field that I want through a resonance and through this basic technology of connection. Which means that if you start talking about, as you're telling me about your parents, like I can move there, I can go there. If you start talking about something that happened in your early life, I can go there. If you talk about your wife and children, I can feel them. I learn to navigate this field. So for me, I feel quite empowered. I can go anywhere within this fifth dimensional reality. Everything, it's like a library. Everything that has ever happened on the earth is here. So there's both the static sense of the field and being connected, but there's also all the information. There's also all the content and experience. And you learn to navigate this because your body's plugged into it. And because your body's plugged into it, you don't feel separate from it. So our job through our work is to plug ourselves in more and more, and to plug life more and more into us. And progressively, it's just natural to be not separate. So similarly, if you shift your focus from your nervous system or your energy body to the sense of light, and there's many ways to do this, but one of the first ways that I invite people is I invite them to contemplate their unique birth in life. Like when you were born, something unique arrived in the world. There's a you that arrived here. And this helps people shift their focus in their body from like the things that have happened in their life to the light that is landing and moving through it. So as we learn to stay connected to this experience of arriving, of incarnating, of being light, we then learn to relate as light. And the world that opens up to us, the relational world that opens up to us, is not just the history of the earth, but it's the history of the universe. And so through the development of this light body and the integration process that happens with the entire universe, the same technology is available, just at a higher level. You can go anywhere in the universe. And going somewhere doesn't mean you actually leave. It means that you use your vehicle, you use your light body or your energy body, in this case your light body or your soul, to relate to everything that else is happening at a light-based level in the higher dimensions. So you can feel where people come from, you can feel whole civilizations that exist, and feel what life is like for them if you know how to use this vehicle. Again, I teach this as well because it's extraordinary and fun and very powerful transformationally, because it's through this vehicle that we actually allow more light to land in this world. And this is really just opening up for human beings, I believe, in a radical way. And I'm just so excited to share it and explore it with people. But the trick is that, again, if we want to feel collective consciousness, or we want to feel not separate, or we want to feel higher dimensions of reality, or all these beautiful things, the trick is to realize that your body is not separate from it. Your body is designed to be a part of it. So you use your body to participate at the level of love and light, at the level of energy and light. And as a result, you get plugged into it, and as a result, you have access. That's the technique, so to speak. And most of my work is at these two levels with these two functions, helping people plug themselves into the fifth dimensional reality, helping them relate to others at the fifth dimensional reality, helping them to plug themselves into the sixth dimensional reality and relate to the extraordinary structure of the universe.
Wow. Thank you. I think if there should be a new rule, if you're to be qualified to become a president, it's called the inner work.
I can't. It's hard to imagine. When I met Thomas Hubel, one of my first thoughts was like, how is this guy not in charge of everything? Like, why is no one paying attention to this guy? Like, how is that not the qualification? So I'm with you. That's the world that I envision us moving towards. Of course, maybe you still have to know about economics and policy and stuff, but this stuff's awful important. And I think politically, knowing about the universe actually is going to become really relevant quite soon. So
that's awesome. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks. I've had so much fun, and I appreciate your curiosity and openness, Boo.
Thank you. And I'm going to end it with the Adashanti quote. And he says, the more in harmony you are with the flow of your own existence, the more magical life becomes. Thank you for sharing your magical life with us.
Well, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Namastizzle.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.